I am an ardent follower of, well, I mean, who isn't? Everyone knows this outlet. Everyone follows them, and we are just at the end of every month, we are dying to know what their columnists have to say about the news of the day.
Hmm.
I'm sure you all know what I'm talking about. Inside publications.
Hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like,
Hard-hitting news.
yeah.
Just
What they do is they set up newsstands in the richest neighborhoods so that they can get very affluent advertisers to advertise to their very affluent people, and then they write absolute tripe that panders to the affluent class. Have you heard of my boy R.E. Grasswitch?
I have, you know what? I'm gonna tell all of the truths here and say that prior to today, I have paid so little attention, even though that shit shows up on my porch.
Literally not until today.
Yeah.
R.E.'s my baby.
Literally.
He's my guy. R.E. is a former. This is going to be a super long intro. R.E. is a former B columnist who then jumped ship and became a lackey for Mayor Kevin Johnson. And then afterwards, he quit. He ended up at one of KJ's former nonprofits, and all of the nonprofits were tied in with his work at City Hall. That's how you get free shit into your nonprofit. Councilmember Chenier at District 5, he does this all the time. You get stuff donated to your nonprofits, and then you help out whoever's donating to you there. Like, that's kind of how that's the MO of how that works. And it's how you can do sort of fuckery without it being on public record. Anyway, long story short, Grasswitch ended up at one of KJ's nonprofits and then left. And then he slunk over to the News and Review and tattled on them, tattled on Kevin Johnson, saying like, oh, we did all sorts of election work and all sorts of other work on city time, which is like good to know. But it's like, this is the kind of guy he is. He's very mercenary. He wrote a piece here. Apparently he's a columnist here at Inside Sacramento. He wrote a piece called Sky's the Limit.
That was the best boomer wordplay you could get.
It's so good.
He's so proud of himself. The sub is how a council member torched her career. So basically he discusses, let's just go into it, because he keeps calling people who are like really good people shitty things. Summer brought an unwelcome spectacle to City Hall when an unknown who became somebody let an even bigger nobody crash her political career.
Possibly the most bitter sentence ever uttered.
What a sad old man. Dude, you're rich. Just like go be rich somewhere. The first nobody is City Council member Katie Valenzuela, who rose from obscurity last year to bounce incumbent Steve Hansen, woo-woo, into retirement. Valenzuela is a tireless campaigner who benefited from personality traits absent in Hansen, humility, sincerity, and the willingness to listen and learn. Voters like her passion for community issues. First of all, calling Katie a nobody, this our buddy Ari, that's, come on, man. Let me just jump through it. Like, he talks about her early on and how like she didn't know how to do, the processes, but she was, humble about it. And then I love this. Such annoyances were forgivable in a new council member, especially one who never served on a school board or planning commission. Valenzuela acknowledged her confusion over city council practices and procedures. Listen to this sentence. She was dazzled by the parliamentary voodoo of Mayor Darrell Steinberg, a magician who can tip his top hat and make white doves flutter from a consent agenda. R.E.
Yeah, I don't. I guess I don't even know what to say about that. Except that like reading it, I was like, wait, are we talking about the same person? Like how, I don't know. It's very like this guy and the way he like tries to make poetry out of like shit talking. And also I love to think about Darrell wearing a top hat with doves in it.
Well, this is just another Photoshop opportunity.
Oh
Say
my God, PJ.
that, PJ, this is why you're on the show.
All right. Well, this is a Friday episode. Any listener who wants to hop in on that, I am dying to see this. But like, I do recommend people read this piece. It's one of the funniest things I've seen in ages, and it's so long after the fact too. It's like we're all moving on. Ari, fuck off. Like he just wants to raise the ire of rich Sacramentans.
Right, because this is dated for August, right? And all of this is like
It's long gone.
long gone.
But it's like the case didn't end until July. So now
Sure.
On a monthly, you got to wait till after the fact. But like, it's so funny how he glosses over the fact that like the ACLU jumped on this because this was a free speech case. And they were like,
Right.
no, you can't do that. Like, no. And he just refers to them. What did he refer to them as? It was, I mentioned it on Twitter that they were like professional agitators or something, right?
That sounds right. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just all so silly. And then like he loves to call Skyler a nobody.
And serially unoriginal is Skyler.
Ari, baby. Are we projecting?
I mean, at the same time that he's like shitting all over Skyler, he also like is shitting over any like, because he talks about council offices using high school interns to do work in the past, and he's like, you know, and here's Katie hiring this guy that like is just doing like very entry level work, right? Like, so not only like you're shit talking Skyler and every high school intern that's ever been in City Hall, done any work for the council.
It's the classic ruling class lib take, I
totally
think, right? It's like, how dare anybody poorer than me end up in City Hall? How dare you? And like Ari, sorry buddy, he's in.
I also like the line that says he, talking about Skyler, threw no Molotov cocktails, but he told his less hip audience members that such acts as terrorizing the domestic serenity of Steinberg and city manager Howard Chan were perfectly acceptable.
I was just going to bring that up because that is the most 50s sounding phrase that I've heard.
Domestic serenity.
It's, yeah.
Domestic serenity. And then it's like, it's the Shiplinski argument against the First Amendment, which is total bullshit. Listeners, did we tell you to do anything? I'm pretty sure every episode came after those demonstrations as well. It's just
correct.
It's all absurd on its face. Ari, when I see you, I'm gonna hug you. I can't wait to see you.
I love to think about Kempa just like running up to this guy
and being like, "Are you okay?" Like you could have just dropped this topic, man.
Yeah, I wonder. I'm curious about what like. I think it probably felt pretty good for Darrell and Howard and Chief Hahn and even the city attorney.
Yeah.
To just sort of have this like happen and be done, and they never really made any public, you know, comment about any of it. And then all of a sudden this guy, he's gonna get everyone, you know, riled up, and they're gonna get fucking letters because of this guy. And I'm sure they're all just like,
he doesn't respect his readers either. He doesn't like reference anything. He doesn't quote anyone. He doesn't give them like who actual players are. It's like, it's kind of sad how much he doesn't respect his readers. And then on top of that, like, I think you're right, Shannon, like it's a parting shot that comes from none other than Darrell, the city manager, Howard Chan, Susanna Wood, who consistently loses in court. How do you keep doing that? And everyone else who voted to try and sue Skyler out of City Hall. Sorry, that's not happening. And now let's move on, right? Like, let's just actually try and navigate a city and state that have a lot of issues right now, you know?
Yeah.
Anyway, speaking of moving on, we've gone on very long about this, shall we?
Yes.
Yeah, let's do it.
Voices, the things they said. Voices, some from those dead. All the voices heard. Voices, things we say. Voices, they're in your head. All the voices heard.
Hello, everyone. You have Kempa.
Oh, shit. It's Shannon.
There's no Skyler. Yeah.
I was waiting for Skyler.
Well, then we just stepped all over Paul. Oh my
That's
God.
fine.
Also, by the way, I call you PJ. Like, are we calling you Paul? Let's call you Paul.
Okay, that's fine.
Are you Paul? Do you prefer Paul?
I either. PJ is what I call into the city council with. And I'm gonna yell at Darrell.
Oh.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, we'll call you whatever you want. So it's up
You
to
just
you.
tell us what you want us to
Yeah.
say.
Alrighty then.
It's funny, like when I talk with mutual friends of ours, like I always refer to you as PJ after your last episode with us because that's how you are in my head now. And then they
Right.
all call you Paul. But like, yeah. Anyway, we don't have a Skyler today. We don't have Flo. Flo is still out east. Shannon, that doesn't look like your home. Can you tell us what's going on here?
Yeah. I'm actually in a rental home that is on a lake called Clear Lake. Also, I don't know anything about this town, but I'm pretty sure well, what I know about this town is that there was a Confederate flag flying in a window as we were coming into town. So I feel like I know enough about it. The really cool thing about this house, though, it's got no running water. So, yeah, this is going to be a really good little time away.
I think you and the friends are really going to build a great bond, discussing what this entails, like different smells, what you have to do outside that you would normally do inside. This is a real rapport builder. It's a team building thing in my book.
Yeah, I was thinking about just like designating one of the bathtubs as the shitting bathtub. And
a shitting tub, like it's like a trough full of shit.
I mean, it's like outside. I'm looking outside. I have a lake view from where I sit, and the terrain is a little rough. So like either we have a shitting tub or I hang my ass off the deck and just let it. You know what? This episode clearly is for the real ones. Because
also, episodes like this, I wish Shannon, like that you and I had Flo on to be, you know, we like the straight character, like, oh, this is, you know, actually,
Right.
no, she likes talking about poop. She's cool with poop.
it's Skyler who's like, let's move on.
He's anti-scatology.
Yeah,
Okay.
he doesn't prefer it. And the thing is that I love to talk about poops and farts.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I am poop fart agnostic.
Uh-huh.
You can
Don't
neither
know if they
prove
exist.
nor disprove if I like them or not. That's
Oh,
my-
I see. So that's like your own like special sort of agnosticism around.
yeah.
Okay.
And I'm not gonna, you know, I'm gonna be coy about it. You'll never know if I like them.
So cheeky.
Maybe we move into the actual
Yeah, we should probably talk about some stuff that actually matters.
Yeah. Okay. So, there is some real news of the day. The Sacramento News and Review, Scott Thomas Anderson wrote a very important piece discussing how the limit for our, previous rent control law that we have in the city of Sacramento, it has the ceiling for rent hikes for the particular buildings that it falls under has risen from 6% from your previous rent of the previous year to 9% of the previous rent of the previous year, which means if your rent is I don't even know how to do the math. If your rent was $600, which it's nowhere near that, your rent's always going to be like $1,000. So let's say if your rent is $1,000, the highest last year that your rent could be raised would be $60. But now if your rent is $1,000, the highest it can be raised is $90. Can someone tell me why this is a concern? And then we'll actually get into how we got here with this law.
I would say it's a concern because a good deal of people out there don't necessarily have the money to be able to afford these increases, let alone many out there even be able to afford just the rent.
Yeah, I mean, we have to take into I think we should always be taking into consideration costs of rental housing, but we especially should be taking into consideration costs of rental housing and the cap on rent hikes when we're living through a pandemic, when people are experiencing so much joblessness, when they're experiencing insecurity with food, with healthcare, when they're unable to like tap into the same sorts of social supports that they maybe once were able to as a result of living through this time when being supported by close proximity is actually dangerous, right? So like people can't necessarily double up if their rent is hiked. So just what is this, like the economy, Sacramento's economy, when you like drive around, you see that it has really taken a hit as expected by the pandemic. And the economy is what like bleeds into housing, right? Like, so how do we expect any of this to make any sort of sense? Like,
right.
You've got vacant buildings, you've got places that are just like not able to reopen in the same way that they could previously, and suddenly all of a sudden 3 more percent, like 3 extra percents is a lot, right? Like,
yeah. Well, and already in our region, wages do not match rents. And that gets exacerbated when Bay Area folks looking for cheaper options move to the Sacramento region and they buy homes, or they swoop up rental spaces that just drive up prices if we don't have a control on it, which is why the control itself is important. And as our dear friend of the show, Elliot, says, when rents go up, tents go up. So then that raises the population of people who are unhoused. And on top of that, that is more expensive, right? That is more expensive for a municipality, for a state, for a country. If, like, it's more expensive to do all the sweeping and all the terror that they do against folks who are homeless than it would be for them to just provide, or, in the long run, build public housing, something like that, that would actually serve those folks, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think the other part of this is considering, like, I think like that point is so important. And that brings up how like information access and how people, I think there is sort of a gap in understanding in some cases, where the gap in housing is as well, right? And so if we have this like issue where in general the people who are making decisions are not also like contextualizing that there isn't enough housing for people, like how are we getting all of the, how are they like succinctly disseminating all of this information that like rents are like these caps are going up and down and that people can get support in this and that way. And like the more the city continues to like alter and like, you know, like, yeah, alter things one way or another, it's like, how does everybody stay on the same page about all of this? Like in this piece that we read from the SNNR, it talks about the city having mailed out 8,000 registry packets to owners and managers of some 40,000 properties. So I think that's another like interesting data point that, and I guess, and maybe someone here can help me understand this. Does this mean that like, does the math work out that only 8,000 people own 40,000 properties? Like, are we looking at that big of?
I think shit, I gotta call up the article. I thought I could just roll through this without looking at it again, apparently. But I think that sounds correct.
Because that means that for every one person, they own about 4-ish properties.
You know,
Sorry, that took me, I got distracted by what I was reading on the screen and then also talking about, but.
I mean, what stood out to me in this piece, and I'm just going to blow through that because Shannon, I don't know the answer, and I'm sorry.
It's totally fine.
What stood out to me in this piece was just the history of this and who's right and who's wrong. And I think about culpability and, you know, how rent should be rising compared to how it is. Mm-hmm. And I think about how, do you remember Measure C?
Yep.
Can we talk about that? Can someone tell me what Measure C was?
Rent control.
Rent control, right.
Yes.
Yeah. This was fall of 2020. Tens of thousands, right? 40,000+ people at least. I don't recall the exact number. Sacramentans signed a petition to put real rent control on the ballot. And real rent control being that you can't raise your rent for these spaces beyond what's it called? CPI?
Yeah, Consumer Price Index.
Yeah, so basically like whatever the market's rising at, you can't raise it beyond that. And I think there was a cap there of 5%, right? Something like that?
That sounds right, yeah.
That sounds right, yeah.
And so this was what real rent control looked like to us, to the people of Sacramento. During this time, and this is a little history lesson for folks who haven't been paying attention to this, our city council of that time, which did not include Katie Valenzuela or Mai Vang, it also didn't include Sean Laloe, but he's a piece of shit and he would have gone for this anyway. They basically did a backroom deal with neo-lib labor leaders alongside the interests of capital, right? The apartment association, right. The landlords and the builders, you know, things like that. And they basically did the deal that resulted in something where it's CPI plus, it's 5% plus CPI is the limit, right? So now we have 5% being what landlords will just tack onto anything, plus whatever percent it is. I have friends who've already gotten 9% increases in their rent this month. This is something that landlords will do immediately.
Totally.
Right?
Yep.
And so it's 5% plus 4%, and now that's what they're doing. And people in Sacramento can afford this because our wages in this region are not conducive with our housing prices in this region, which is why it results in people in the streets, which is why it results in, you know, Shannon, at Mary House, the number of people and how that's risen the last couple of years, like, right? Like this is, it's all tied in, and it's all tied into people like Darrell Steinberg, Jay Chenier, like everyone, Angelique Ashby, all of them up there who did this deal. But there were some goodies. And one of the goodies, what they did in this backdoor deal is 3 people had to sign on to this measure, this ballot measure, signature gathering. 2 of the people who signed on to it, they became a part of the deal, and they're like, yes, we will fuck the people of Sacramento because, you know, you're doing this half measure here. One person didn't. You know who that was?
Michelle.
Hey, friend of the show, Michelle Paraset, right?
Yeah.
They had the deal, and then she saw that happen, and she's like, you know what, this isn't right. And then she said, let's move forward with this ballot measure. Let's have the people decide on this. And so we did. And Darrell Steinberg, and then the former opinion editor at the Bee, who's long gone by now, by Gil, they tried to fight this, and they called her bad faith. They had, you know, took pictures of Matt Reed, who was Steve Hanson's chief of staff's cell phone, and like sent that to the Bee, and it ended up all over the pages of it. And still, you know, the people of Sacramento succeeded in getting that on the ballot. It didn't pass, which was going to be a Sisyphean task anyway, because we're up against a lot of capital, and it was just going to be tough. Right. But I think it's really important that it made it to the ballot. Am I going on too long about this?
No, I think it's an important piece of like the landscape of how we ended up to this place, right? Like, yeah, I think it's important.
And when you have, you know, Jeff Harris takes all this money, our council member, from, you know, all of these deep-pocketed people, that he's only going to do what they tell him. We have 2 people vying to be state senators, right? In Eric Guerra and Angelique Ashby. And these are people who sold the people of Sacramento right down the river. Right. And here we are. Darrell Steinberg champions himself as like a man of the people, and here we are. And it's something I think we all should remember, and we should bring this up, you know, on occasion.
Well, it was virtually every city council member at that time was on the flyers that I was getting in the mail. They were talking about how bad rent control is. Right. And it's a huge task to overwhelm that amount of influence.
Yeah. Well, it's a lie, and it's a lie that has been 60, 70 years baked into our culture, where we're just trying to now wake people up to this, where it's like it's deeply illogical to say when you put a control on rent will go up. No, it means you've put a control on rent.
I mean, I think it's a lie, but I think I would push even harder and say that, like, what the folks who were like anti-rent control were doing was like actively participating in keeping people poor and struggling, right? They were actively saying that the people of Sacramento who they represent do not matter as much as folks who have more money, more power, and more influence, and can pay for their comfort. Like, and so we're talking about rent there, right? But then you have to push that a little bit further, and that also, like, that perception and or those decisions that were being made also informs how they make decisions around housing policy, how they make decisions around policy that impacts people experiencing homelessness, right? So like Measure C is sort of this like gauge. You could really see where like the elected officials who represent your district, where they stand and what they feel about these really important things, which is like renters' well-being and their ability to stay to have like secure their housing at a rate that is affordable,
Right.
and so much more. And I think this S&R piece goes on to show us that, like, getting down further into the piece, it talks about Joanna Hare. Johanna.
I hope we pronounced that correctly, because this is a real one who pays attention to the show.
Who is with the Sacramento Tenants Union, was able to review some 700 emails to and from the city involving these tenant protections, and what was found out.
Brilliant work on their part.
Totally.
Right? On Johanna with everybody else there to just like to do that homework. Like, we can request public records like this.
Yeah.
And when you do that, that's power. That's power in your hands. Like, and that's a hard thing, you know, because just because this stuff is publicly available does not mean it's easily accessible.
Right.
And that's why what they're doing is super important work. So thank you to all of the tenants' rights advocates who hopped on that endeavor. Sorry, Shannon, keep going.
Yeah, so that what that ended up showing was that or like some of the concerning things that came out of that was that the quote is, the only cases where we could find city staff intervening on behalf of a tenant was when either the Sacramento Tenants Union or the Alliance of Californians for Community Empowerment or Sacramento Self-Help Housing was advocating on behalf of the tenant. We didn't find a single case where city staff helped a tenant who had just emailed them. So the reason I bring that up is because it just continues to back this, like, you know, where people are, where folks were voting, and where we continue to see, you know, this, like the rent hike thing is like, it's all just like falling in line with the city, not some people, because we have Katie in this case, who is quoted in this piece as, you know,
who's Katie?
I'm sorry. Yep. District 4 council member Katie Valenzuela, who is it, you know, that used to be Steve Hanson's seat, and we remember Steve Hanson was someone who took lots of money from developers, and so he wasn't about that rent control life.
Yeah.
But yeah, so all of this like research and transparency that they pulled forward over at the Tenants Union really just shows, like, what the fuck, Sacramento?
Yeah.
Like, you don't give a shit about renters.
And like, I don't know. Like, Paul, do you have anything to say on this?
No, I was just gonna, well, it tracks a lot of what I heard from tenants, is that basically that every time they go to this board that's supposed to help them out, they don't get a lot of help, and oftentimes they see that group actually handing out information to their landlord, and more so helping them out than the actual renters. And it's like, that's the entire point of this, and they're trying to say that they're doing a good job in this article, the way they phrase it, but it's just like, no, you're really not. You're not showing up for the tenants, and you literally require some method of accountability external to the city. And it's like, why should we have to do that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. And it's a thing that's just like, it's going to take a while for us to actually address the issue of our housing crisis because we have a shortage of affordable housing. Affordable is the word that we always have to include, especially as socialists or leftists. Like, that's what we're missing here. And it's going to take time. I read in a piece regarding an upzoning bill, right? This bill that would, make it so instead of just like one living space per unit of land, you can have 4 living spaces, and that can, increase living spaces throughout the state. That's a good idea, but basically they were saying like it's good, but it's not going to solve the problem, right? The
Right.
Turner Center of at Berkeley, right? This is the Turner Center for Housing Innovation. They estimate that there is a shortage in our state between 820,000 and 3.5 million, right? I assume this is units and not people. And this is something that, like, until we deal with that, we have to stanch the flow of people who will inexorably get kicked out of their homes because they're being priced out. And while that happens, and that will continue to happen, we have to continue to try to ameliorate the pain of those folks who can't afford housing and end up in the streets or somewhere outside. Right. And we can't allow our city, our state to terrorize them, right? It's on the people to stop that, because the city and state will do that with their police force, with their rangers and things like that. I might be like taking us a little through a roller coaster here, but I think it's important for us to remember that side of it. And I don't know all the answers, but I tend to agree with the more well-read people on the issue of housing that we need quality public housing in every single backyard, in every single region of every single city. Yeah. And this country and this state has disinvested in public housing for decades and decades, and that this is why we are where we are.
Well, at the behest of apartment complexes and landlords as well, because it behooves them to keep the supply small, because as long as you have the supply small, the rent for the remaining houses is going to go up. The purchasing prices are going to go up. So why would they want to push for more housing when all that's going to do is affect their bottom line?
Yep. And then, Shannon, did you see this piece about LA passing a new law?
I did.
This new anti-homeless law, effectively, which it goes against. Basically what is happening is, there's this decision, this Boise decision that said, if you try and roust people who are experiencing homelessness and you don't have shelter beds and you don't have housing to offer them, this is deemed cruel and unusual punishment. Mm-hmm. Cities are trying to find workarounds to that, which it looks like that's what this is, right?
Yeah, and this passed in LA. It was a sweep. I mean, not a sweep. It was a 13-2 vote. And this ordinance is outlawing camping around parks, libraries, and other public facilities. And it did come with a lot of objections from folks in LA. And one of the things that the folks who supported this ordinance said was like, well, it's not going to be like people are out sleeping out in front of a library and we just go out there and we're like, get out of here. You got to shelter or punishment. They're like, we're going to send outreach teams and we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And they're like, this could take months. It could take months before we actually ask someone to leave. But the reality, that doesn't fucking matter. It doesn't matter because this is rooted in punitive justice, which effectively removes someone from the community of which they are a part because the community at large is actually unable to provide for them, right? So it's, what it does is it perpetuates harm. It's an act of violence to pull someone out of community. Because what happens when you're experiencing homelessness, and based on everyone that I talk to, is you create these like families of folks, right? Like that becomes your community. The people that you sleep with, that you camp with, that you're sleeping around, those folks become your community. And once you start shaking all that up, you immediately start to introduce the possibility of violence or harm, because people don't have the same access to social support, right? And it's not the same sort of social support that we as housed folks know, because it's not normative. I think one of the things about this that really stands out as well is that one of the folks.
Can you say what you mean that it's not normative? Like what do you mean by that?
So if I get in a pinch and I can't pay my rent, and it's like I'm gonna get evicted, I call you, Kempa, or I call PJ, or I call Skyler, or I call my housed friends, and I say I can't pay my rent. Like, I either need to borrow money, or
I can't believe you didn't say Flo, because that's the first person I would call.
I call Flo.
Like legitimately.
And then you start to troubleshoot, right? It's like, is it money that I need? Is it a couch hop situation? Is it like, do I need to reach out to a mutual aid org? Do I have like, is it a renter's rights thing? This is like an approach to being in crisis that makes sense to us, right? As people who have like activated networks that are attached to any sort of like infrastructure that includes like cell phones and internet.
Right. We all have somewhat of our own personal social safety net, but in these non-normative spaces, that means something a little different.
It means something different because it means that like when you're sleeping out on the river together, there's a person that stays up all night, and that person sleeps during the day because all night they're awake making sure everybody's safe.
Mm-hmm.
Or you have a person who's like doing all the food prep, or you have a person, like there are all of these different things. Or like there's about to be a sweep and you all come together and you pack your things and you make decisions together. So it's like, it's not the thing when you think like, what does social support look like? It's when you're experiencing homelessness, it's not, you don't have like it's not that normative approach, which is like you make a phone call or you reach out to a friend. It looks a little bit different because of the context.
Sorry, I took you off track, but it like I think a lot of people might not actually know what you mean by that when you say non-normative.
No, yeah, I mean it's kind of like an acronym alert. So, so one of the things I think that stands out about this for me is that one of the folks who sits on the who's in LA on the council is Mark Ridley Thomas.
MRT.
Darrell Steinberg, Master of Crows, is here in Sacramento. These two folks are co-chairs of Governor Newsom's Council of Regional Homelessness Advisors.
Mm-hmm.
And so we find ourselves in this space where these two folks in these two cities are making moves to who have been appointed by the governor, who says that homelessness is it's something that he really wants to address, and he wants to throw money at it essentially. But you've got these two guys who are co-chairs of his council who are out there like, how we deal with homelessness. It's all punitive.
Punitive, right.
Yep.
You know, and that's like the same. This is the thing that is happening, is being discussed right here in Sacramento, this right to shelter thing, which is the same as what LA is saying. Go inside. You can't park, you can't sleep in these public spaces or go inside.
Yeah, but in like, I think Steinberg is very careful with his wording in Sacramento, and I think he says right to housing. And right to housing.
He does say right to housing.
And right to housing is a term that some homeless advocates like are like, ding, like they're interested, right? But he does this always with this asterisk. So right to shelter always implies like punitive, 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 and then like get into this basically the city of Chico. I don't know if you two know, the city of Chico tried to set up a bunch of cot beds on an old runway at an old airport and say, this is our shelter. This is your right to shelter. So you can't stay here. You have a bed on this old runway. And basically it got taken to court by human rights activists, and the judge was like, no, this is not shelter. There are no showers here. There's no amenities that you can even conceivably view this as shelter. So that's where that term comes from, and I think in its worst sense, it manifests in the way that the city of Chico did it. Right to housing, we're down a better path, but what we see with Darrell is that he's still seeking to make it a punitive thing, right?
He just can't keep that part out of it.
Yeah, he still views it the same way that the interests of capital do, that it's like unhoused people they don't want housing. They don't want it. That's what they believe.
Yeah, and in the process, what does it do? It like perpetuates these negative stereotypes around people experiencing homelessness, because what's the thing where it's like, we're not going to like, the punitive measures aren't going to be criminal. You just have to go into alcohol or other drug treatment. And it's like who's to say? Like, what if that's not even the thing? Or like, you have to get mental health support. Like, but also
and
what
just
if
imagine if we had that kind of infrastructure for any of those things, the kind of infrastructure that could make sure that folks who are literally in a different place every day because you are forcing them to be in a different place every day, that you can get them to go into a therapist once a week, that you can find a way to do that you can get them to do any of these things you're advocating without a central place where they have amenities and can stay and they are housed and they are okay, so that you can actually social work this. Sorry, Shannon.
No, I think like my response, I mean, yeah, accurate, but also my other response to that is like, yeah, but what about like ever giving a fucking shit about affordable housing and rent control ever, right? Like, I don't know how many stories, and anyone who has ever done any sort of outreach work or like gone out to do mutual aid work has had conversations with people where it's like, how is that, like, how did you come to experience homelessness? And like, how many of those folks are like, my rent just kept going up and up and up and up.
And I couldn't do it.
And I couldn't do it anymore. And then I didn't have a place to live. And so I lost my job. And then I spent everything I had in my bank account. And now I just can't fucking get ahead. Like, so what, like, these are like, this whole show is about the path that the city of Sacramento creates to homelessness.
Right.
By not giving a damn, by like having these leaders who I think like what the first issue is that they're just not thinking about it because they're so disconnected or so far removed from the problem or from working people. Like, is it that they are like sitting in their homes, drinking really nice liquor, being like, I'm going to fuck over every renter in Sacramento? Or is it that they are doing the part that includes drinking the nice liquor and just not thinking about how many people around them within probably a mile, if not less, are actually experiencing homelessness?
That's exactly go. Sorry.
I was just say, I just wonder how much of it is them able to separate themselves out from the outcomes of what happens, and them able to partition out the fact that it's just my policy. It's not it's their choices. It's this thoroughly buying in to the social aspect, which tells us that poor people are inherently bad.
Right.
And so once you get to that point, it's very easy to put off all the blame onto them.
Right.
For anything bad that happens to them along the way, and I'm just trying to do what's best for the house people.
I'm glad I shut up, because that's exactly it. It is, and like, listen, this can feel reductive, but it's really not, folks. It is, and if any city council member is listening, this is what it is. It is the interests of capital looking this way, right? Looking to their left, and then with their right foot, shoving poor people deeper into poverty, deeper into difficult situations, deeper and deeper down the California Apartment Association, pushing them out of their housing so that they can continue to get profits. And then once these folks are unhoused, then how dare you be unhoused? And they turn around to the city council members, the county board of supervisors, the state legislators, who they got elected with their capital, with the capital that actually was being paid with the people's rents until they ended up unhoused. So now they don't serve them anymore. They turn around to them and say, get them out of our sight. Get this away from us, because we're trying to have a society here. Whereas it's these interests of capital, and by proxy, these politicians who take their money, that are the reason that this pipeline towards abject poverty, towards the worst possible social outcomes, is actually manifesting in this state and across this country. That's the real culprit here.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
got preachy. Sorry.
No, I think it's important, and I think it's important. I guess where I'm at now is like, okay, so we just got really yelly about housing and really shitty leadership and homelessness, and so what do we do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if this is something that also riles you up, like, what do you do? And I think like the SNR piece gives us multiple organizations or agencies that we should be staying connected to and supporting when possible, in the Sacramento Tenants Union, Alliance of Californians for Community Empowerment, Sacramento Self-Help Housing. These are spaces, these are orgs that are going to advocate on behalf of the tenant. And I think the other part of this is that, like, when we cannot forget the arc here, which is that when rents go up, people are going to experience homelessness. When people are unwilling to consider what it means to live in, what it means to just sort of like redefine what single family home living is, right? Like, we need to start thinking about how to most effectively use plots of land, and put more houses on plots of land, just like better use of space. If we're not willing to engage in those conversations and like radicalize our imagination so that we can have a future where everyone has access to the same sort of like rad Sacramento that those of us who like live in it and love it know, right? Like if we're unable to do that, people are going to continue to suffer. And that when I think the other part of this is we're starting to see, and Kempa brought this up, that the mayor is saying right to housing, and right to housing has always been a thing that has tickled advocates in the right way. Like historically, we've all been like, right to housing is the thing, right? Because we want to get people housed. But this is starting to feel like Mayor Steinberg is weaponizing that
Because he always has the asterisk, right?
Right. And so we need to make sure that we stay on top of that and activate the accountability process like yesterday and start just like letting him know that we know, we get it, and we see where this isn't making sense, where like make it make sense for us. How is this human centered? Start asking those questions. And I think if we were like, those are just the things off the top of my head that I can think of, like where I can place my rage tomorrow.
I like that. Yeah. Like just sort of basically what you're saying is to be a harbinger of that concern, which will certainly show itself within the next year or two.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
How about you, Paul, PJ?
No, I totally agree. Start calling it out early on, letting them know when you see the issues, when you see the dog whistles that are going to lead to negative things down the road, and understand that we're going to be watching you. We're going to be listening to everything you're saying and everything that you're not saying, and making it clear that people know the impact that this is going to have.
Yeah. This episode has been a joy. We've had some audio issues. We've had some takes. It's been a journey. But here we are at the end. So thanks, listeners. And we will see you. We're going to have, I believe, I'm going to be out of town. I'm going to be at a podcast convention next week. So just a little I think like Thursday night, like Questlove's playing. So I guess I'll be dancing like Shannon just was right now.
Exactly like that.
And then but I believe Monday we will be unlocking the episode with Nikki where we talked about what was going on at the island. We had a number of people reach out to us and say, hey, that's a really important episode. You should make that public. So like, I'm sure a lot of you have heard that already. So like, sorry for that, but like, we're going to make that public.
It's time. Yeah.
Yeah. And then Thursday of this week, we do have an episode coming up, and I very much look forward to that. I will not be on that because I, again, will be still in Nashville, but we've got something good planned. So we will see you very soon, and we love you.
Also, I would like to say to the real ones who came out on
oh my God, yeah.
Saturday, Saturday, just thank you. I thought it was, I loved having everyone over and meeting so many of you. I do just want to say, like, you're all really bad at drinking from a keg, but like, you don't even have to worry about it because it got taken care of, and I felt really good the next day.
Oh God.
I
helped for an hour and a half, and I was done the next day. Like,
I'm pretty sure, I should have counted. I wish I would have counted how many beers I had. And nobody tell Flo this, but like I take medication that means that I can't drink carbonated beverages because they don't taste the same. And like in the morning, I went outside and lifted the keg and was like, what the fuck? These people don't know how to drink beer. And so I was like, well, guess what I'm not doing today?
She went to the bathroom where Skyler was mixing his vaccine and was like, hey, Dr. Skyler, can I just like not take my meds today?
Yeah, Skyler was like, totally fine. Don't even worry about it. It's a really good idea, though, if you don't take your meds, that you definitely drink half of a quarter barrel.
About this? Can we just call the show? Jesus.
Yeah, we're done. You all
right.
Let's do that again sometime.
That was amazing. Thank you, everyone who came out. And yeah, thank you. You were there too, Paul. So yeah, bye-bye, everyone.
Oh, bye-bye.
Bye.